Well, today I am speaking with the author of the new book called Modern Merlin. Her name is Lon. She's also a sacred geometry artist. And we're talking about all those esoteric things like the law of attraction and the unified field and connection to God and the divine, but how that actually is a practical information that you can use in your life to get out of anxiety and to feel like that you have more control over your life and live from a place where you're feeling so much happier. So if that's what you're looking for, then you're going to love today's podcast. So enjoy. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast for this week. This week, we're going to be having a very esoteric kind of a conversation. My special guest is author Lon from her book is called Modern Merlin. How are you, Lon?
I am great. How are you, Natalie?
I am fantastic. Now, I love this subject because we're talking about concepts and modalities and abilities and gifts that normally, when we were younger, we might have shunned, we might have hidden because, the world wasn't ready, to understand these kind of, different energies. But now I think the world has changed quite a bit. And so, as you know, women of a certain age are most of the listeners that we have of the podcast. We're also getting to that point in our life where we're like, okay, we've done the nurturing and the wifing and the mothering and all that kind of thing. So now what is it that I want to do? What is my legacy? What is my purpose? What am I stepping into here? So I want to start initially by just with you sharing your story, because you are one of the people that I'm talking about. You had these, abilities when you were younger, but then, life and people and whatever get in the way. But I think that there's a lot of people who are listening that will identify with your story.
Yeah. I grew up in Holland, the Netherlands, and Holland is a very small country. And overall, the mentality in Holland is very down to earth. It's very much like, oh, just do normal, right? We don't do the fuzzy things. We don't do the flooring up things. And as a child, I was already like really, really sensitive and probably very intuitive. But all that was not part of the concepts that my family was familiar with, or in my country, the culture was familiar with. So as a child, I felt very strange. I felt very different, and I felt very lost. And often I felt very scared because I would pick up so much information from the in-betweens, right? I would just pick it up by just connecting to people, just by seeing them, just by meeting them. I could feel it in my body. I could feel whether they were tense, whether they were angry or sad or any of that. And often I could even feel their physical pain because I would be so drawn. I felt like, oh, I want to just put my hand there, and I didn't even know why. And whenever I try to ask about this, the answer usually was like, oh, you're just imagining it. I mean, it's not real. Basically, the understanding the feedback that I got was that it wasn't real what I was experiencing. So I hid it. I spent a lot of time laying in bed and just kind of hiding from the world and being under my blankets and just being in my own imaginative fantasy world, and not sharing it anymore with the outside world because it got rejected. And it took me a long time to really start stepping out and openly embrace it and talk about it and feel safe doing so.
Yeah. And I think that we can all identify that, we can tap into our intuition. We can, we pick up on the energy of others. For me, like I can't watch something like the news or some kind of violent shows because I'm so affected by it that I just like, I can't. And I don't know whether I would call myself an empath, but I would certainly say that I have some kind of empathic ability there because, I can't handle those kind of situations. And I'm sure that, there's a lot of people that can identify with that as well. And I think that when, we have these little hits, sometimes we have these little intuitive hits, it's too easy for us to discount it and go, oh, that can't be right. Or, why would I have this ability? But really, we all have the potential to tap into these kind of abilities.
Right, right. And what if it would be so that as human beings we are evolving to a point where we all get so sensitive that um we cannot be around violence. We cannot do violence, we cannot see it, but we cannot cause it either. I mean, isn't that would be ideal, right? That would take us into a world where we actually are all kind to each other, and we can see each other as human beings, and we can tap into that compassion and empathy. So I feel like we're actually moving in the right direction. And what I was always told, and what a lot of us are told, like you're oversensitive. I think like, no, we're not. That's actually how we should be. I think everybody else is just numbed out and just, they're focused on an external, and they don't even really know how to tap in and, tune in to what they're feeling inside. I think we should be disturbed if we see violence. We should feel it in our hearts, right? We should be sitting like, oh, I can't watch that. Like, why would that be normal?
Yeah, no, exactly. And so with Modern Merlin, you actually talk a lot about all these different modalities, all these different concepts that are, existing in the world right now that, we could possibly, already identify with, that we could already, see ourselves in. So tell us a little bit about, the motivation behind writing the book and some of the concepts that you have in there.
Right. Yeah. Well, because I became a sacred geometry artist, and I became known for my sacred geometry art. That is how you and I initially, years and years ago, also connected, because we both felt so drawn to sacred geometry, and I created these images and you were really aligned with it. And over the years, I learned that sacred geometry is why we feel so drawn to it, is because it speaks to us on a very deep soul level, right? Our intuition just kicks in because there's no rhyme and reason behind it, why it would evoke so much emotion or so much thought or different ways of thinking. So I started on that path of like, so what's going on? What happens when we tap into that part of us that can pick up on other things? And I realized like we are still operating collectively from a paradigm that is so three-dimensionally based. And when I say three-dimensional, I mean it is based on the external, it is based on what we see around us, the stuff, right? Our bodies, our cars, our clothes, the way we look, all that stuff. We don't really collectively pay a lot of attention to the intuitive inner world, like what comes to us through our visions, our dreams, our thoughts. And the fun thing is that science by now has actually gotten to a point where we can say that everything is energy. Like we are all made of energy, and even our thoughts and our feelings and our dreams, our intentions, all of it is energy, right? So what we think and what we feel and what we intend matters. It can literally start becoming form, tangible form, if we stay in that place. So I just realized like we have to shift that paradigm. Like, how cool would it be if our children in schools, and I know this is right up your alley, right? Like if in schools we start at an early age valuing what kids feel and not just valuing how they perform.
Right.
I mean, that would make such a difference. We would create different human beings, different adults, and that would eventually help us to create, again, a kinder and a more compassionate world.
Yeah.
So so what I do in Modern Merlin is I take all these concepts that are at the foundation of our belief systems, like what is reality and how do you know if something is real? Like what is time? And how come that everybody feels like time is speeding up? Like what's going on? Right? What is three-dimensional versus multidimensional? I mean, we hear talk about multidimensionality a lot, but what does that mean? And how do you tap into it? And how do you know where you are? Right? Law of attraction, I go into that. So I just take all these things that could be very scientific, and they are, but I hopefully put it in a way, in words, that is really easy to understand.
Because, and I think that, if anyone's been following me for a while, and this is a very, common, but much common knowledge now, is that, we are part of this unified field,
Right.
this field of infinite possibility. And I know my life changed drastically when I understood that concept. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. So everything is energy. So we're all kind of connected. But if I'm resonating at a certain frequency, then whatever is a match that frequency is going to move through the field and be attracted into my energy as well, which is the basics, the scientific basis of the law of attraction. But when you understand that, like when you truly understand that and you can embody that and you live life from that knowledge, then you realize that you don't have to hustle and grind. You don't have to force things to happen. You can, have your intentions, you can have your goals, you can visualize, you can see where you're going. And then things will, as you start to take action, start move towards those things and become more of an energetic alignment, then, things sort of come into our sphere. And so, like, how do you live? Like, how does that change, like that knowledge, how does that change your life? How does that change your life experience?
Oh, it took away the anxiety. It took away my fear. I live, and I get goosebumps just saying that out loud right now. I live in trust. And whenever I lose that trust, I know it's time for me to go inward more. I meditate more. I go outside more. I make sure that if I feel imbalanced in the external world, that it's time for me to take care of my inner world, because I have control over that. And as long as I feel like I am in entanglement, in co-creation with the universe or with a higher power or spirit or whatever you want to call that, it means that there's always something I can do. I just have to pay attention, right? I have to pay attention to what shows up in my life, who shows up. I can be like Sherlock Holmes all of a sudden and start discovering the patterns, like, if something happens over and over, or a certain person with a certain characteristic comes into your life and it happens over and over, then it's like, oh, cool, this happened before. Now I can start figuring out what it is in my thoughts or my words or my actions that makes that attract, right? Mm-hmm. So then I can do something. So it gave me empowerment, and it gave me so much more inner peace, just trusting that it will flow. As long as I stay in alignment with myself, things will just flow. So way less anxiety.
And especially during a time like we're experiencing now, the entire world is going through a pandemic right now. But not everyone's experience of that is the same.
It's interesting what you said before, like how we are all connected. And the easiest way that I always explain it is like, if you just envision yourself, you have a bubble around you, your energy bubble, and that bubble is made up out of the thoughts that you think and the feelings that you have, right? It's what your mind generates in thoughts and what your heart generates in feelings. And those two together makes up the flavor, the frequency of the bubble around you. Mm-hmm. So if you meet somebody else, they have their own bubble, right? That is made up out of their thoughts and their feelings. So then when you get closer to each other, you can easily see that those bubbles at some point are going to overlap, right? And that's how we pick up on each other. So what's happening right now in the world, where so many people are stressed or anxious or confused and kind of lost, is like we have a lot of bubbles out there that have that flavor. So, and it all influences each other, right? That's why it's such a strong signal right now, because as soon as you come, especially in groups, then it just amplifies, because there's so many people that are feeling that way.
Yeah. And you don't have to physically be in each other's, geographical place for you to still pick up on that energy.
Right.
That's getting infiltrated through the unified field.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And we're getting more sensitive to it, right? Because we're evolving. So we're picking it up faster and faster. And so on one hand, the time that we are living in right now is incredibly exciting because things do manifest, are able to come into our lives so much quicker. But on the other hand, it comes with a sensitivity as well. And it comes almost with like an accountability and a responsibility, right? We can no longer hide between like, oh my gosh, these circumstances are horrible in my life and poor me, because now we know like, well, there's something you can do though, which is not to say that you can always control your circumstances. We cannot, but we can control how we deal with those circumstances and how we approach them. So
yeah, I always say that that we don't have control over the external situations, but what we do have control over is how we choose to see it, how we choose to respond, and how long we allow it to affect us moving forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Because some of us are still tethered to stuff that happened 30 years ago, that's still influencing us now.
A great example was my father, and he is not on this airplane anymore, but he said until the day he died, he was convinced that my favorite color was red. And that was because sometime, I don't know, I was probably 5 or something. At some point, my favorite color was red. And he was still tethered to that story and that vision, or that whatever, that image that he had of me. And he always felt like, well, but that's who you are. And so he would always talk to me, in that manner as well. And it was such a good example of like, I got so stuck in his story. It was very hard to grow beyond his story, because he would just emphasize like, well, yeah, but I know my daughter. And I would go like, but it's not who I am anymore. So
yeah, no, and it's interesting because it affects our relationships, our relationship to ourselves, a relationship to others, and especially the people that we know, but our relationship to the world at large. And I think that one of the best things that we can do, and you talked about going in, but I also think the other part of that is being able to shift into becoming the observer.
Yeah.
So when we can be that, if you've read The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer.
Next to my bed.
Yeah. He's like, who am I? He goes, I am the consciousness that is aware of my thoughts. I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my feelings, but I am the consciousness that is aware of that. So when we can kind of step into that place and then be able to, emotionally detach ourselves from whatever is being that catalyst for us in the moment and go, okay, well, if I'm seeing it from this viewpoint, then what's actually going on here? And I think it's from that point that we actually get to do the healing, to understand, the dynamics of what's going on, and then to be able to make different choices on how we feel and how we show up in those moments.
Right. I call it the eagle eye view, right? You go up in the sky and you take a look from above, and then everything becomes smaller, but you also get a larger view of the bigger picture.
Yeah, I love that.
Yes.
So let's talk about some of the different, concepts that you do talk about in the book, that have been around for billions of years, for forever. But that I think that some people may not necessarily be aware of right now.
Okay. So, well, just our idea with magic, right? Just the concept of magic itself. It's such an interesting concept because we have all heard of it. And most of us are very fascinated with it. We love it when we read books about magic, or we go to the movies, Harry Potter, The Lord of the Rings. I mean, Star Wars, there's so many examples of where there is magic at the core of what draws us in. And I think the reason is because magic gives us the hope and the idea that we can change things the way they are, right? We can change our reality, because that's what magicians do. It's also very interesting to think about like what the definition of magic is, because magic is just a word that we give to things that we experience or that we can see obviously happening, but we don't have a logical explanation for it. And as long as we don't, we throw it in the box of, oh, but it must be magic, right?
Right.
Then when we look over the evolution of even human evolution, there were a lot of things that used to be magic that now have been proven by science. And now that we understand it, we took it out of the box of magic.
Right.
So it's really good to realize that, you know, magic is just something, it will change all the time. So what I'm just inviting people to realize through my book and the way I approach it is to say, like, we all have these magical abilities already inside of us to actually be of great influence and great contribution to our own lives, because we understand now that we are energy and therefore entangled with that unified field that you are talking about, or if you want to call that spirit or the universe or God, right? There is an entanglement going on, a co-creation, if you want to. So, and that gives us the magical abilities to actually have an enormous amount of influence.
Right. And so with the book, you're explaining the science behind some of these concepts as well.
I do, yeah. In lay terms, right? I do talk about quantum physics, but I try to like bring it down to really easy, understandable language, and also with a lot of examples that go back to our own lives. Like, oh, you have probably already experienced some of this in your life, and then you go like, oh yeah, that's true. And I had the honor to work on this book with a dear friend of mine, and she is a college professor with a PhD, and she is in curriculum development. Her name is Diane Young, and her and I worked on this together. So, and she was always the mind part behind anything that I would bring up that was science-based, to make sure that what we're saying is correct, but it's really simple.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, you look at things like quantum
Right.
science and epigenetics and a whole thing, they're fascinating. But to be able to break that down into a very understandable format is exactly what you've done in the book, which is fantastic. So what are you hoping readers, what are you hoping their experience is going to be when they read the book?
I hope there's going to be these moments like how children have, like, oh, excitement about discovery and this incredible feeling of empowerment, realizing like you're not stuck, you're never stuck, you can always do something. I always say, like, just move. If you feel scared, if you feel angry, anything, just get up and start, jump up and down a couple of times, or wave your arms, or do something, because if you move your body, you move your energy. If you move your energy, you move the way you feel. So I want people to feel empowered and maybe get a better idea of why things are really the way they are. And then we can just work with a different model of reality and start forming our lives in a different way, instead of right now we are all looking around externally to our leadership, like, tell us what to do, and it really doesn't look that they really have all the answers either. So maybe it's time to grab the steering wheel ourselves, right?
Yeah, I love that. And because I think for me, living from that point, it helps me to positively influence all the outcomes in my life.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Like I said, we are all going through a pandemic right now.
Yes.
But our experience is different.
Yes.
So for me, it's like, well, I'm not going to concern myself about things I have no control over. What I'm focusing on is how I'm showing up, how I'm still fulfilling my purpose, how I'm, in the mission, and how I'm still, showing up and helping people, and how I'm choosing to see things. I was talking to someone just earlier, actually a friend of mine who lives in Switzerland. We're talking about the difference between, how the countries are handling the pandemic and the information and all of that. And I said, what I've come to believe is that I don't have the answers. I don't think anyone does. I mean, this is a whole new thing. Right. So, we're all figuring it out as we go. And I do understand that none of us are seeing the same information, depending on what we click on and the algorithms and all that kind of stuff. So for me, it's like, okay, I'm going to make choices that are happy, that are good for me, but I'm not going to force that onto anyone else. I'm not going to make out that I think I know something that you don't, and that I'm better than you, and blah, 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 and you're an idiot for not thinking the way that I do, because I understand how, again, the observer outside of the situation, seeing what's going on. But everything I do, I choose to do from a place, because I understand how important energy is. I choose to do from a place of kindness and compassion.
Yes.
Like wearing a mask.
Yeah.
I'll wear a mask. I don't know whether it's effective or not, but I know that how it positively influences other people around me, especially my building where there's a lot of older people, how they feel safer, they feel better. So I do it from that place.
Yes.
Not from a place of, oh my God, I've got to wear a mask. This is ridiculous. This is a form of control, blah, 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 you know.
Right.
But again, you know, the concepts and things that you were talking about in the book help us to live from this place where we don't have to be in this high anxiety anymore. We do get to understand the bigger picture, and we do understand how we can influence our energy and always have a choice, so that we're not always at the whim of everything that's happening around externally outside of us.
And especially, you know, exactly what you're talking about, of that you are just going to assume that if everybody would just do their best, and if we would all realize that we're all doing the best that we can, even our leadership, and that nobody really has the answers, then we can just look at each other and go like, wow, you were really trying. I can see that. Yeah. Right. And why don't you share with me what you picked up, and I'll share what I picked up, and then maybe we can make a really great mix together, and maybe we can make it work, and maybe not. I mean, I don't think we've ever been in this place before in human evolution, right? With what's happening in our physical world in combination with what we now know that we are capable of causing and creating with our consciousness. So now it's up to us to put it together in a new way. Right. And that's what I'm offering. I'm offering a new paradigm, a new belief system that will help us to bring it all together so it becomes integrated.
Right. Regardless of what's happening outside of us.
Right. Because there's always going to be something else, right? There's always going to be something. I mean, this was impacting the whole world, but at some point there's going to be something else. There's always going to be external things. There's always going to be changes. There's always going to be curveballs, right? And I think the whole point is exactly what you're saying. I think the whole point is for us to learn how to keep that inner balance.
Yeah. And to live a life where we're actually feeling like we are genuinely happy and grateful, that we, you know, that when things come along that we're like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, right.
Rather than derailing us from our journey.
I was just saying that this morning to a friend on my morning walk. We were talking about it. I'm like, well, maybe we can look at it like everything is like a big puzzle, and every time something happens to us, or you know, an experience or a person that comes in, you look at that piece of the puzzle and you go like, okay, where does it fit? You know, it's like trying to make it all fit and keep on looking for the bigger picture also. And sometimes things don't fit, and that's okay too. It's okay to say like, this is not my cup of tea, not my jam, right? But I'm thrilled for you that it is yours.
Yeah, I know. I say, not my circus, not my clowns.
Right. Yeah, I love that expression.
So Lon, where can people get hold of the book? Tell us where we can, and where they can connect with you.
Yeah, my website is probably the easiest way, and my website is lon-art.com. My book you can get it on Amazon as well. And there's also an online self-paced course that goes with it that you can access on my website. And it will just take you kind of through the book with exercises and prompts and videos and meditations. And so through my website, and other than that, it is for sale on all the general, like Barnes and Noble and Goodreads and you know, the
places, yeah,
right, all the usual places. So
that's lon-art.com.
Correct.
And you know, I love how you've put the little, you know, all the exercises and the things with the book as well, because like we said, you know, I think we all have an idea, an understanding that there is this field of infinite possibility, this unified field, but actually embodying that information and living from that place is like life-changing. And so to be able to add those different, you know, exercises and things that people can do to really experience what that is and to understand that and really embody that, I think is so important. So
it is. It's all practice, right? And even I'm sure you agree with this. Even for me, yes, I understand some of it and a lot of it, and I'm sure that there's a lot that I still don't understand. So even You know, it's an ongoing journey. It's an ongoing learning, evolving, and you know, yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Lon. It's been an
Yes,
absolute
you're
pleasure
welcome.
chatting with you today.
Thank you.